Recently, in April 2025, Ethereum's founder Vitalik put forward the idea of replacing the Ethereum virtual machine with the RISC-V architecture, fundamentally changing a core part of the pioneering smart contract blockchain. This isn't the first proposal of its kind. We've seen other proposals to transition Ethereum to Ethereum WebAssembly or EWASM, a subset of the WebAssembly architecture. A transition like this is expected to be largely disruptive to Ethereum as we know it. It is no small matter. For some, it may even sound like the death knell for languages born from Ethereum, such as Viper or Yule, or the most obvious of all, Solidity. But that is not at all to say that RISC-V is a stranger to Web3. Chains like Nervous and rollups like Polygon Maiden have been experimenting with RISC-V. Efforts like this have given us a peek under the lid of Pandora's box, and we all know once you open that, there is no going back. In terms of what it can bring to blockchains, RISC-V is an excellent candidate. It is by design a deterministic architecture, which is a must for blockchain execution layers. What lies inside of Pandora's box, however, would be the possibility of things like parallel execution, among others, that would be considered dangerous ideas on the EVM as we know it today. Polkadot's upcoming PolkaVM is a transition that is similar to the one that Vitalik is suggesting for Ethereum, where Polkadot's current architecture is about to take on a big and bold upgrade to RISC-V. But before we talk about what this brings to the Polkadot ecosystem, we need to talk about what is RISC-V. The Reduced Instruction Set Computer, or RISC, is a computer architecture that has been around since the second half of the 20th century. It is technically the opposite of a Complex Instruction Set Computer, or CISC. The basic difference between the two is that RISC computers are more efficient at basic computations, while CISCs excel at more complex computational processes. So in this case, the main trade-off is that a RISC would need to have complex programs broken down into simpler primordial computations first, while CISCs can handle more complex instructions from the get-go, hence the name. Over these years, we've seen variants of RISC processors in lots of electronics, from smartphones to tablets to smart TVs and even wearable devices like smartwatches. You may already be familiar with ARM processors. ARM actually just stands for Advanced RISC Machines, a proprietary architecture designed by ARM Holdings. More recently, Apple Silicon, the chips powering the latest lines of Macs and iPads, mainly use ARM architecture. So now we look at RISC-V, an instruction set architecture developed by the University of California, Berkeley, and it is so named because it is the 5th generation of processors created at the university. Since its creation, RISC-V has been by design a royalty-free instruction set architecture, which is free to use, modify, and implement, making it an open standard that's similar but not quite equivalent to open source. What is more is that RISC-V does not exist in isolation either. There are already commercial RISC-V systems on today's market, from system-on-chips to operating systems. So to come back to the topic at hand, RISC-V is becoming this sweet spot that is attractive to blockchain ecosystems. Open source and open standards, they should get along well, and so far this is shaping up to become the grassroots of what can hopefully become a significant techno-punk movement. The kinds of synergies expected from Polkadot embracing RISC-V in the PolkaVM upgrade are expected to add traction from the Web3 side of the computer industry, but it will also welcome developers who are already familiar with traditional systems programming. Now let's get back to Ethereum. This question about a transition in Ethereum's execution layer is not one of if but when. The EVM has come a long way and it will still continue to evolve for the foreseeable future. Embracing RISC-V is going to take a lot more work than, say, the merge, where Ethereum moved from a proof of work to a proof of stake blockchain. If the merge is akin to like a heart transplant for Ethereum, a transition to RISC-V would be the equivalent of brain surgery. Now, once again, this is not to say that execution layer changes have never happened before. zk-Sync Era, for instance, implemented EVM equivalence earlier this year, opening the chain to accepting EVM bytecode alongside its native ZK EVM bytecode. But since they're both sort of EVM, this is kind of more like a minor surgery. So another question is that some people may ask is, if it ain't broke, why fix it? The EVM is already sufficient for most DeFi applications, so why mess with it? One of the biggest motivators since the dawn of Ethereum is gas fees, since gas is a common denominator on Ethereum, since if you're not paying gas, someone else is. The lower the gas fees, the more savings in the long run for everyone. Having layer 2 blockchains was one of the more widely adopted approaches to the gas war. However, since gas is basically a compute cost, efficiency is the name of the game, and RISC-V is expected to have efficiency gains that could potentially exceed that of the EVM by several orders of magnitude in certain use cases. That means Ethereum with RISC-V is likely to be able to run and execute smart contract functions faster with significantly fewer computational resources. In the same vein of efficiency, here's another example: efforts like EIP-4337, which were to bring about native account abstraction on Ethereum and other EVM chains. Now, this has largely been stumped by, among other things, the caveat of on-chain signature verification. Cryptographic operations on the EVM alone are very limited and also computationally expensive, and this drives up gas costs. Solutions for this have largely been moved off-chain, so they move the signature verification off-chain for the sake of saving costs. Now, RISC-V may be able to keep more of account abstraction on-chain since it has, by nature, native support for more kinds of encryption algorithms. Here's where things get interesting. Ethereum's proposed transition to RISC-V creates a fascinating parallel with Polkadot's ongoing PolkaVM development. Both ecosystems are essentially trying to set their course towards the same architectural destination, just via different paths. Polkadot's transition from WebAssembly to RISC-V through PolkaVM will potentially turn Polkadot into an early mover in the RISC-V blockchain space. However, if and when Ethereum successfully implements RISC-V, it could fundamentally reshape the competitive landscape. Ethereum's massive developer ecosystem and also its existing plethora of dApps and DeFi infrastructure, transitioning to RISC-V could accelerate the adoption of RISC-V tooling and also its standards across the entire blockchain industry, even beyond that of Ethereum. Through all of this, we need to see RISC-V as an ecosystem unto itself too. Blockchains adopting it will be mutually expansive for both, since it can lead to a larger ecosystem of RISC-V compatible tools, libraries, and developer expertise. There are tons of mutual benefits to be had, but this may or may not come at the cost of the earlier mentioned Ethereum-born languages such as Solidity and Viper, since if things run more efficiently on WebAssembly, these languages will have to make a solid case for themselves in order to have any reason to continue existing. So let's wrap things up. RISC-V on Ethereum is a big change. Vitalik's proposal, however, is not a scorched earth approach. The EVM is going to live on, either as a parallel execution virtual machine or through a RISC-V interpreter to keep what we have on Ethereum today alive and well. So don't worry about your DeFi, your NFTs, or your meme coins. Just like Ethereum, they'll still be here for a long time coming. I'm Daniel Anthony, a DevRel for Polkadot Southeast Asia. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Peace out.